Flight attendant denies champagne to black girl. She makes one call. Team gets fired. The airplane hummed with the restless energy of a late-night flight. But for Aisha, the air felt thick with something heavier judgment. At 22, she was used to eyes lingering a little too long, but nothing prepared her for the sting of being singled out at 30,000 feet. Aisha had boarded the red-eye from Atlanta to Los Angeles, her red jacket a bright splash against the muted cabin. She was heading to her first major art exhibition, a milestone after years of clawing her way through a world that often dismissed her talent before seeing it. In first class, a rare treat she'd saved for, she settled in her seat, buzzing with anticipation. The flight attendant, a woman with a tight smile and sharper eyes, approached with a tray of champagne flutes. Aisha reached out, but the attendant's hand froze mid-air. "Sorry, ma'am," the attendant said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This is for first-class guests only." Aisha blinked, her hand still outstretched. "I'm in first class," she said, pointing to her boarding pass. The attendant's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed. "Must be a mistake," she muttered, moving past Aisha to serve a white businessman in the next row. "You got a champagne, no questions asked." The cabin seemed to shrink as whispers rippled around her. Aisha's cheeks burned, not with embarrassment, but with a fire she'd felt too many times before. She wasn't just a passenger. She was a black woman daring to exist in a space some still believed wasn't hers. Her pulse raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Excuse me," she called out. "I'd like to speak to the supervisor." The attendant, now joined by a colleague, scoffed. "No need for that. Just sit down, miss." The word "miss" landed like a slap. Aisha's fingers tightened around her phone. She wasn't new to this game. Microaggressions were old friends, but this was different. This was blatant, a line drawn in the air between her and the respect she deserved. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "Uncle Ray," she said softly when he picked up. "It's happening again." Raymond Carter wasn't just Aisha's uncle. He was a civil rights attorney who'd spent decades dismantling systems that thrived on moments like this. His voice was calm, but ironclad. "Tell me everything." As Aisha recounted the incident, the attendants huddled near the galley, their whispers sharp as knives. The supervisor, a man with a clipboard and a tired expression, finally approached. "What's the issue here?" he asked, glancing at Aisha like she was the problem. "The issue," Aisha said, her voice cutting through the cabin, "is that I'm being denied service because of the color of my skin." The words hung heavy, silencing the murmurs. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some pulling out phones to record. The supervisor's face reddened, but he waved her off. "Let's not make a scene." Aisha wasn't making a scene, she was making a stand. Uncle Ray's instructions echoed in her mind. Document, stay calm, and don't let them gaslight you. She held up her phone, now recording. "I paid for this seat. I'm entitled to the same service as everyone else. Why am I being treated differently?" The supervisor stammered, but the attendants doubled down. "You're being disruptive," one snapped. The other leaned in, whispering just loud enough for Aisha to hear, "Maybe you shouldn't be here." That was the spark. Aisha's call with Uncle Ray was still live, and he'd heard every word. "Aisha," he said, his voice steady as steel, "I'm contacting the airline's legal team now. Stay strong." Within minutes, the plane's intercom crackled. The captain's voice was tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're addressing a situation. Please remain seated." Aisha's heart pounded, but she stood taller. The attendants' faces paled as their radios buzzed with urgent messages. By the time the plane landed in Los Angeles, the story had already spread. Uncle Ray had looped in a contact at the airline's corporate office, and Aisha's video, uploaded mid-flight via the plane's Wi-Fi, was trending on X. Passengers from the flight corroborated her story, their posts amplifying the outrage. The airline issued a public apology within hours, but it wasn't enough. The next morning, Aisha woke to news that shook her to her core. The entire flight crew had been terminated. Not suspended, not retrained, fired. The airline cited a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, but Aisha knew the truth. It wasn't just policy, it was the power of her voice, backed by a community that refused to stay silent. At her art exhibition that evening, Aisha stood before a crowd, her paintings vibrant stories of resilience and identity. She spoke about the flight, not with anger, but with purpose. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's about every person who's been made to feel less than. We don't just sit down. We rise up." The crowd erupted in applause, but Aisha's eyes were on a small wooden sign near her artwork, a last-minute addition. It read, in bold, handwritten letters, "Justice takes flight." It wasn't just a slogan, it was a promise. Aisha had made one call, but it was the call of a generation demanding change. And the world was listening. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.